Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to find out what you're about to know. This is your Screen Queen, your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there and welcome back to the show. This is your female Tarantino, your Screen Queen, Samantha Parrish. So, I mentioned in my last episode about how the 90s was an experimentational era. Well, that definitely was put to the test with an anime like Yu Yu Hakusho being on the air. This is a very, very special episode, as this is going to be the first introduction of an anime onto the show, but this is my all-time favorite anime. Even though I love Sailor Moon and I love Naruto, Yu Yu Hakusho will be the one thing that I want buried with me 6 feet in the ground when I depart the earth. That is how much I love this series. This show, among the other action movies that I have mentioned, this is the beginning of my love into the action genre. As much as Batman did play a part in it, but, not to give any crap on my angsty leather bat-themed hero, Yu Yu Hakusho did for me what Batman couldn't really do, and it still is one of the most influential things for me in my life, and I am so thankful to have that series in my life. We all have that one series that does something for us, and for me, it's Yu Yu Hakusho. And I have been waiting for this episode for quite some time. There are so many stories that I cannot wait to share about what it was like to watch the series, my journey watching the series. There's so much to get into. This is not going to be like the other episodes I do on The Screen Queen when I talk about trivia and talking about the impact, that this is a little bit more of a personal episode for me and talking about my stories. But there's also a lot of history within my story that shows about how this series traveled among the syndication on Cartoon Network. It's a very interesting thing that not many people know about. So, let's dive in to my favorite anime of all time, the second episode of the birthday series. This is Yu Yu Hakusho. So, before I get into my stories about Yu Yu Hakusho, I really want to be fair to my audience that might not be as immersed into anime culture as I was. So I'm going to give the synopsis. So the story follows a 14-year-old boy named Yusuke Urameshi as he gives his life to save a young boy from a reckless driver. And then all of a sudden he is told by a Grim Reaper, a very bubbly Grim Reaper named Botan, saying, "Hey, guess what? So, you weren't supposed to die today. We're going to give you another chance at life. How about it, buddy?" He's like, "You know what? I don't know. People didn't like me that much. My mom didn't really pay attention to me. My friends don't pay attention to me. There's some lug trying to beat the shit out of me every day, and he keeps failing because he's not as tough as I am. Pfft, forget it. I'll just be a ghost." But then he sees that people truly do miss him, and it's such a different take on the trope when you have a character that doesn't know how much they impact the lives of others. It's like one of those, how do I say this? It's a Christmas story thing somewhere, like an Ebenezer Scrooge thing, where you're having the character has an out-of-body experience to see the others around him and know what really goes on when he's not there. And Yusuke gets that Ebenezer Scrooge moment to know, and he's like, "You know what? I'll do the trials. I'll give it a shot. I want to go back to the living world." And he gets through it. I mean, I hate to spoil it for you, but we got 111 episodes of the show. You knew this guy had to come back to life. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense as to why there are 3 other characters and monsters present in the series. So, he comes back to life, and he is basically been told by the spirit world, like, "Hey, so even though we messed up, you weren't supposed to die today, but you gotta work for us as a spirit detective." And so he's like, "Crap, okay, why not?" And he becomes the spirit detective of Earth, where he goes on certain missions that the spirit world gives him to save his town and, basically the world from the demons that are trying to kill the humans, or any threats to the human world. Yusuke is basically your Ghostbuster. Who you gonna call? You gotta call him. And along these cases that he is given by Spirit World, he does get some unexpected assistance. One of them is his school rival that tries to beat the hell out of him every single day for years. His rival, Kuwabara. And he ends up having the assistance of two demons named Hiei and Kurama, who were also my favorite characters, but I will gush about them later on because I gotta stay focused on to the topic at hand. With all four of these characters together, they would embark on a major evolution of their lives. That they had to stop demons in the demon world. They had to go into a dark tournament to stop a bad guy, a bad demon essentially. Then they had to go against a former spirit detective, and then everything came to the dramatic conclusion with going back to the demon world. And that's a whole bag of chips, but that's the best way I can be able to sum up 111 episodes that had 4 seasons. I tracked this thing for 3 years. This is the best I can do to be able to talk about that, being the super fan that I am. I don't mean to give myself that title, even though I'm a self-entitled media queen in a way, but when you love something so much, that kind of becomes like, you become the encyclopedia of that show to explain how the world building works and how the characters work and some of these little things that you love so much and can gush about for hours. I've met so many amazing people that love the show as much as I do to talk about how this world works. People have Star Wars, people have Star Trek, I have Yu Yu Hakusho. So now that the show has been introduced, I can officially start my story about how I got into Yu Yu Hakusho. So, this tale begins when I was 7 years old. I was in my mom's room and I was given free reign of the TV while my mom did whatever it was she was doing on her computer. I don't know what it was. My focus was the TV. And I was surfing through channels looking for something, and it dawned on me, hey, my favorite network should have something for me to watch. I'm gonna pop on over to Cartoon Network. And I didn't really know what was going on with Cartoon Network. I don't think anyone really know. Cartoon Network back in the day was just doing whatever the hell it wanted with its schedule, and where it was just kind of experimenting with things. At that point, Adult Swim had not taken over on Saturday nights yet, because I didn't see the Adult Swim logo, so I thought, okay, well, something's gotta be on that's not cartoons, but I'll give it a gander. And never gonna forget it. It was the character Kuwabara, as he was fighting I'm trying to cater this carefully as I can to my non-anime audience. He's fighting a villain named Byakuya, the White Tiger. And naturally, good guys save the day, so he slays the Saint Beast, and they move on. And the entirety of watching the last probably 5 or 7 minutes of this episode, I'm like, I'm in love. This is the moment I've been waiting for. My life was all about like the Barbie dolls, and it still kind of was at that point in my life, but I loved all girly things. But this was my first introduction to something that was not a female-oriented show or a feminine-driven show. This was a dude show, and I knew it, and I was in love. And so I pointed at the screen, and I'm like, Mom, look at this show. But then she does her mom math, and she's like, wait a minute here. This is not meant for my 7-year-old daughter. And she said, Sammy, I'm not going to let you watch this show. And so I became a lawyer at 7 years old, and I was stating my case. I'm like, Mom, look at the colors. They're so happy. Look at that long red-haired character. That's a girl. I just know it. I did not know it, actually, so that was a shocker for me when I found out. And I was like, look, the opening's so happy. And they slay beasts and stuff. And she's like, Sammy, you're not going to watch it. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I'm 7. I can't do it. So I lost my case. I was a short-lived lawyer. But as time went on, one day, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I see the show that I was not allowed to watch. And I was kind of shocked to see that something that was on at night was on during the day. I didn't really question it. I was happy to see the show again, but naturally I'm going to have to inform my mother about this show. I kind of approached this conversation as if I was getting married. Like, Mother, this is the newest love of my life. He had me at Spirit Gum. May you allow us to be together. And so my mom kind of put the pieces together thinking, well, if it's on during the day, then it can't be too bad if something like Cartoon Network would let this play. So she's like, sure, yeah, you can watch it. And I'm like, yes! So that was my life. Every day, 5:30 in the afternoon, Yu Yu Hakusho, and I was just absorbed in this show. Now, taking a pause on the story, when you really look at something like Yu Yu Hakusho that was almost as violent as Dragon Ball Z, but they had to work so hard to make sure that it was censored enough to put it on a network that's usually for the ages of 7 years old, that I can't even imagine how hard they had to work to be able to put that on during the day. That is not a show that comes on during the day, especially later on when I tell you what it really was. And then it kind of went different places on Cartoon Network. This show had a difficult time to be placed. They tried during the day, and then it switched to being on at 7:30 or 9:30 at night. I don't quite remember. And I thought, well, it's back on Toonami. That's probably where it belongs. I'm going to wait it out. I can't wait to watch it. This is going to be great. And so I followed that for all of the arcs. There was the Dark Tournament arc, and then it went into the Sensui arc. And that kind of lost me a little bit, and I'll go into more detail when I discuss some of the scenes of the show. But there's a specific reason why I mentioned the specific arc, because that's where it stopped. Out of nowhere, it went right to the beginning. And me being 10 years old watching the show, I'm like, okay, alright, that's weird, but I don't care, I'll watch it from the beginning as long as I get to have it. So I followed that, and the next 5 weeks it just kept playing from the beginning. And right until it got to the 6th episode, the one I was waiting for because it had two of my favorite characters, it just disappeared. I was so confused. This show pulled a friggin' Jimmy Hoffa on me, and I was determined to find it. But of course, Jimmy Hoffa wasn't found for quite some time, so I think you know what happened with me. I didn't find that show. I asked my mom to look and see where she could find the show on the schedule. Like, maybe it went to their network. Maybe it was a different time slot. I was determined to find this show. I had the same kind of audacity and commitment like Daniel Day-Lewis from Last of the Mohicans. Like, I will find you. Oh my god. My mom could not find it. She had to tell me, like, Sammy, I'm sorry, but I think they canceled the show, or they just put it someplace else. It's not showing up anywhere. And I was like, no, Mom, they have to bring it back. You have no idea what this show means to me. They have to bring it back. But then I remembered I'm 10 years old and I have no power, so I was like, oh shit. So I had to basically accept that's what life was. Things happen. That was the first thing I ever really learned as a child, that sometimes networks will crunch things. And that really gave me the reality of the whole way I watch television shows. And then life went on. I was sad about it because it was the first thing that really got me to see a different genre and gave me the action genre. Like I said, I really wouldn't have as much love for the action genre if it wasn't for me watching 4 heroes fight demons. But then, one morning, 5:30 in the morning exactly, I woke up, didn't know why. I'm like, well, why not? I'll wait. I'll go watch TV until my mom wakes up. And so I put on Cartoon Network thinking that maybe there's some kind of early morning slot that hasn't been covered, because Adult Swim didn't really primarily run a lot on Friday nights back in 2005. And so I flipped it on and I go to Cartoon Network. And what do I find? But the show that left months ago on at 5:30 in the morning. I was like, what? What's going on here? What? I was just so ecstatic, enthusiastic. I ran into my mom's room and I'm like, Mom, they brought the show back. It's back on Yu Yu Hakusho. It's back on TV. And my mom was like, that's great, Silver. I'm going back to bed. That's so... I just ran back in. I caught the tail end of 5 minutes. So I find it kind of funny that the way I saw the show back when I was 7 and catching the tail end of it is exactly the same thing that happened when I found it again. I caught the tail end of it. And I was just so ecstatic to have it back. And then the next Saturday, I asked my mom if she could set her alarm so I could wake up at 5:20 in the morning to watch it. And then she saw my tenacity to watch this show. I think it really occurred to her at this point, like, after 4 years, like, wow, you really like this show. Like, that's commitment. That's the most commitment I've ever had in my life, buddy. So she said to me, Sammy, I can use my VHS tapes to record it for you so you don't have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning. That way you can always have it. And I was like, that sounds good. I do like my sleep. So that would be my ritual, was I would take the VHS tape out and go into the living room and I would watch what was recorded. And that went on from the Sensui arc until the very end of the show, from October to April. That was my life. And then it finally ended in April 2006. And that was the first time that it hit me like, wow, it's really over. I saw the entire resolve. It wasn't like the cartoons I watched where it was having like a non-linear plot and it was just random episodes. Like, this was a story that you stayed with. Now, I do have to mention that around that 2000s era, there was a lot of experimentation with anime in the West. And we had some powerhouses like Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z, and I absolutely loved Sailor Moon. That's my gateway anime. But then Sailor Moon disappeared without a trace. And I will get into that at another episode. And Dragon Ball Z was there. It really wasn't the jam in my jelly roll, but it did provide some entertainment for me. And Cardcaptor Sakura was also there, but it wasn't there long enough for me to establish a relationship with it. At that point, when anime was being brought into Cartoon Network, it was like they were throwing things at a wall and see if it stuck, and, well, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, and Yu Yu Hakusho were some of the stuff that stuck to the wall. For now. And that was it. I was like having to live off of these VHS tapes. And let me tell you, I was like feeling the heat with these VHS tapes, having to choose which one I had to give to my mom to tape over so I could have a new episode. It was like Sophie's Choice for kids. It was not cool. It was not pretty having to figure out what was going to be the last bit of Yu Yu Hakusho, and that would be it. That was my lifeline. And then begins my next story about when I got to have Yu Yu Hakusho as a DVD set. Holy shit, it's a wild ride. Holy fucking shit, man. Oh my lord. So, I think my life's pretty much just going to be existing in these VHS tapes. It's all I'm ever going to have. And for my 11th birthday, my mom presented me with these discs in white packages. And I was like, okay, what's this? And I read Yu Yu Hakusho. And she said, now, Sammy, this wasn't exactly the way it was supposed to come in the mail. It wasn't supposed to look like this. So we're going to see how it goes. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm just like drooling, practically crying, knowing I get my show back. And thinking back on that moment that I got the first set of Yu Yu Hakusho discs, that I didn't realize how much my mother saw my love for this show, that she went out of her way to go get these discs for me off of eBay. That all these years that I watched the show, she's like, I think she really likes this show. I'm going to get it for her birthday. Because it wasn't like Barbie movies. It wasn't like Disney movies I watched. It was something different. And she's like, you know what, it's different. Why not? She likes it. She's watched it all the way through. She will not tell her grandmother about it. I ain't going to worry. And that definitely had to come into play because of what I saw on these discs. And then I got the real answer as to why this show bounced around so much. When I popped in that first disc, went to the first episode, like, I gotta do this right, let's do this. Like, I'm on my honeymoon or something, I don't know. And then I hear the main character, Yusuke Urameshi, say, oh, damn it, that old man's after me. My jaw dropped. I was like, what did he say? Did he say what I think he said? I'm looking back at the entrance of my mom's room, and I'm hoping she didn't hear that, because I know she didn't know that was on here. She knew that there was some degree of violence, but the cussing, that terrified me, that my mom was going to find out. And so I was like, okay, this will be my secret. I can't have these discs taken away from me. I just got this show back. And then I turned around and told my mom, because I can't keep secrets. She's going to walk in at some point and find this, and couldn't do it. So she said the same thing to me, like, well, just make sure that Nina doesn't know. Nina's the name for my grandmother. And she said, just keep it a secret. Don't let anyone see these discs at all. I was like, okay. And then time goes by, and my mom told me about where she got the discs from. That they were actually bootlegged copies. And I'm like, oh, okay. Of course, I'm like 11. I didn't really know what bootlegging meant, but my mom had to walk me through that it was basically illegal copies. Like, oh, okay. Oh. So, me hearing the word illegal, that it, like, kind of cleared up the whole term for me. And so I'm like, well, Mom, does that mean, are we going to get in trouble? And she said, no, we're not going to get in trouble. We bought the things, we didn't know that this was going to happen. I mean, shit, we even went out of our way to go get 2 discs that didn't work. It's like, well, gotta get it from the source. We need to complete the series. My mom's not going to know which disc set to get, because it was just sequestered differently. It was 12 episodes per disc. And I remembered, like, to a T, where it began and where it ended, so that way I knew what episode I wanted to watch, so I could be able to tell her, like, oh, it's disc 6 and disc 8. And then time goes on, and my mom sits me down, and she's like, Sammy, those discs I bought you, well, the guy was arrested. I was like, what? And then, my fear definitely flew out of my ass when I heard that. I was very scared. And so, naturally, me being 11 years old and kind of knowing a certain grasp of crime, I'd asked her, I said, well, does this mean you're going to get arrested? And she said, well, I didn't make them. Like, I'm not going to get arrested. Like, oh, okay. So we're just going to keep these things that someone got arrested for. All right. Oh, man. It is, like, the wildest story I've ever had in my life, and I'm glad that I finally get to share it. So thank you so much for having to sit and endure memory lane to talk about how I got to watch this show and what it was like to have the DVDs. But as I grew older, I started to notice that there was a lot of layers to this show, which is the next point I'll be talking about, is the maturity of it. With Yu Yu Hakusho coming out in 1992, it kind of got lost in the 90s. I talk a lot on this show about some certain movies that come out that are really great, or TV shows that come out that are really great, but unfortunately just kind of falls into the time capsule of the 90s, and that's kind of what happened to Yu Yu Hakusho. Yu Yu Hakusho basically had to clutch onto the coattails of the 2 most successful animes syndicated in the US, Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z. And with something that has a lot of potential, but just wasn't really something that could be shown to audiences. And as much as I love the show, it would be a very tough show to have to market. How would you be able to sell something about a spirit detective over something like a girl that is descended from a moon kingdom, or a young alien boy monkey thing that comes to Earth and then ends up becoming the protector of Earth? Like, that's something that has a superhero-like quality to it that could be sold. Having this show, it played around with the perfect amount of edge. Back then, it was one of 2 things when it came to showing mature content to kids, that they were going to be bored or scarred. And Yu Yu Hakusho was right in the middle to be able to give the perfect amount of darkness so you could have something gritty and edgy, but it also wasn't light enough to the point that you were bored. Kids are hungry for something enticing and adventurous, but they also want to be given some credit that they can be able to handle mature themes. As much as parents constantly worried, I mentioned my mother was worried about me watching this show, but it did censor itself just enough to be able to give us these certain themes. Even if some of it went right over our heads, it was still like a badge of honor, like, hey, I watched something a little bit more advanced than I'm usually used to. And the layers that they presented was kind of the layers that a lot of people needed to know about. There was a deep dive about relationships and the demise of them. There was even a mention about cults. There was a lot of psychological information in the show. It really did mature as time went on, and you kind of felt like you got to be matured by it as well, by giving some certain things that you probably wouldn't have learned in a classroom. There were a lot of things I got to learn because of this show, and it was amazing. But the other maturity factor of the show is also with the way that the show itself matured, which is strange to say, but I'll make sense of it. When Yu Yu Hakusho first came out, it was kind of basic, had some pastel colors. It just, it kind of played its cards right. But right when it knew it was getting an audience, then they turned it up to an 11, and it got gritty, it got dark. It didn't rely upon a lot of intense actions where you saw like someone's arm get sliced off or a sword go through their head. It went into the darkest territory of psychology. And the third arc, the Sensui arc, there was a noticeable difference that the art and animation was edgier. It was sharper. Like if you touched the screen, you probably would have cut your finger. And it really built up the character of Yusuke Urameshi as he was not the guy he was when the show first started out. After the Dark Tournament ended, you really saw that this guy is really not messing around anymore. He still has his smart-ass remarks here and there, but he's really settling into his job as a spirit detective, and he knows how to do this job. He knows how to handle his foes. He's gotten stronger and smarter. And that's a wonderful thing to see with the maturity. But with that maturity comes the censorship. Now, it has to be said that as much as this was a show that was a gamble to put on Cartoon Network, the network did not give up on the show. They were like, hey, we put it on here. Kids want to watch it. There's probably some 7-year-old girl out there that's begging her mother to watch this show. We got to get this show on there. We got to do something about this stuff that kids should not really be seeing. So there was a lot of stuff they cut out. There were characters that smoked cigarettes. So they removed the smoke cloud and the cigarettes. So it just looks like this one female character just putting up a peace sign, or some of the male characters have up like a peace sign, like, or having their 2 fingers up for no reason, or they just zoomed in on the face. They did a lot of stuff by cutting out a lot of the blood and a lot of the violence the way that they could. They did that for the different arcs, so I'm going to go down the line. They did that for the Toguro Brothers arc. They did that for the Dark Tournament arc. But when it got to the Sensui arc, that was where things got tricky. That specific season, that specific arc has a lot to get into, and I'm going to say that for a later point, but specifically, what I really want to mention is that was the darkest part of the show. It is the best part of the show. I can definitely see that now, but that had way more violence than what happened in the Dark Tournament arc. Like, something that was more violent than someone getting a sword placed through their head or getting diced to pieces. This was kind of like a realistic violence. There's a specific scene where Yusuke gets shot numerous times by Sensui, and it's like visceral. It's not like what you saw where something could have like a fantasy element. It's like what Don Bluth said, that you can get away with violence as long as you have a happy ending. With what people were watching with Yu Yu Hakusho at that point, with the Sensui arc, that was not looking like a happy ending at that point. That was just straight up violence. It was going into like berserk territory with the fact that it was just nothing but violence. You kind of really felt the peril, but how would kids be able to handle that? They probably couldn't. That was when Cartoon Network was kind of clutching at their shirt collars like, I don't know what we're going to do. And then they looked down at the rest of the show into the Three Kings saga and thought, oh crap, yeah, no, there's no way. There is no way we can have this. And so they pulled it. Knowing that now and seeing the entire series and the censorship between what I remember on TV and comparing it to what I saw with the uncensored version, knowing, dang, they tried their best to put this on television. Nowadays, you probably can put that on Cartoon Network with just like a hard warning or something as they started to slowly progress the mature elements. But this show does not really get enough praise for the fact that it did try to present mature content to kids without having to scar them. But Cartoon Network also had to do what was right, and they had to pull the show. There was no way they could do it. now that we're approaching the 30-minute marker, now's a good time as ever to talk about one of the most celebrated parts of Yu Yu Hakusho, which is the Sensui arc. I did sprinkle a little bit of that in there throughout the duration of this episode, but credit has to be given where credit's due. The best part of Yu Yu Hakusho does lie within the Sensui arc. Now, for some preface, it wasn't my favorite arc when I was younger. It really had to grow on me as time went on when I was rewatching the show, because I was about that dark tournament life. That was the best part of the show for me. I could marathon that entire section for the rest of my life and I would have no complaints. That was where a lot of the growth lied. In the Dark Tournament, you really got to see Yusuke, Kuwabara, and Kurama, and Hiei become better fighters, but you also got to see a lot of them develop a really good, tight-knit relationship, which was great. But that was definitely put to the test in the Sensui arc, where we went from growing our characters to fearing for the lives of our characters. We know they got this. They got their spirit guns, their spirit swords, their rose whips, and Dragon of the Darkness Flame, and now you're up against a fucking cult leader. Son of a bitch, what are they gonna do? This was truly the turning point of the show, where you questioned if they were going to be okay or not. When you saw certain arcs like the Saint Beast era or the Dark Tournament era, like, okay, yeah, they're going to get through it. We know they're going to save the day. You really questioned if this was going to be the end. And you know a show is doing good if it's making you question if there's going to be a future for your characters. With the way the third arc was introduced, it really made you wonder if you were watching the same show. With the way that Yu Yu Hakusho was presented as a no-holds-barred, rough-and-tough-em, slice-and-dice-em anime, and then the third arc just goes ahead and delivers a lot of psychological manipulation and cult programming. It makes you wonder what you signed up for. And it probably makes sense now why I was lost as a child, knowing this was what happened because of the tone change. And shit, it paid off. Not many series would gradually leave enough room so you could explore different topics. I think about shows like Gravity Falls or Star vs. the Forces of Evil, or hell, even Sailor Moon, that still had a very basic outlook, but it still left enough room to develop different topics and ideas. And that's what Yu Yu Hakusho did. It left enough room to go into a different type of danger with having someone who could be able to be a silver-tongued devil and manipulate people to do his bidding. You know, like a cult leader. The characters themselves even say it in the arc. I want you to keep that in mind about what I said with the tone of the show having a villain that feels like a cult leader as I go into the next point about Yu Yu Hakusho to give a spotlight on the villains. I've mentioned the villains kind of sporadically all around the place, but I really want to kind of put everything together now. So, the villains are all memorable. Every villain has I would say a fitting end. I don't want to give away the ending, but I do want to say that they do definitely get what happens to them, and it makes sense what happens to them in the long run, which is a good sign of writing. So, there's been some little subpar villains at the beginning, but we don't get our first true villain until the Saint Beast arc with Suzaku, leader of the Saint Beast, who's just your kind of an average villain, but you know, he's kind of a fun villain. He feels like a Bond villain almost. It's kind of weird to say it like that, but he does. He sits in a fucking chair. He's got a pet thing. I mean, shit. Oh my god. I'm just waiting for him to say, hello, Yusuke Urameshi. No. Anyway, Suzaku's plans are simple. He just wants the portal to Demon World open for the demons to get into the human world. I mean, that's definitely not going to happen, but he does give it his valiant effort. But Yusuke and crew has got to stop him. He's not really a layered villain, but shit, he's kind of fun. He does have some very interesting powers, and it does really give Yusuke a challenge, and it's kind of fun to watch it, getting to see Yusuke get his first big fight with a major bad guy of Demon World. It is It's a hell of a way to finally get into the show. We had to get 14 episodes to finally have what we see in the opening of the show. Anyway, on to our next villain. Is one that took up a good chunk of the show and still got mentioned sporadically. Is a character named Toguro. Now that dude, oh my gosh, like, it was a presence when Toguro first came onto the screen. He looked like the fucking Terminator, and it's been joked about for years about how this character looks like the Terminator. And damn, oh my lord, it basically upped the ante with having Toguro being a character that had a lot of layers to him, but you got to get those layers one at a time. It wasn't thrown at you. The one thing I definitely have to applaud Yu Yu Hakusho for its villains is that when they make a layered character, you get one layer at a time. With Toguro, you definitely felt the danger of his character. He forces Yusuke into the Dark Tournament and says, if you fail at any of these battles and you can't get to the round with me, I will kill you and everyone you love. Yusuke essentially has no choice, but he's also going up against someone that he can't even get on his level. And that begins Yusuke's biggest feat, is having to get stronger. He already barely survived the fight with Suzaku, and now he has to go up against someone that can destroy an entire parking garage with, like, the flick of his finger. That kind of power, something that you feel, so you feel the fear with Yusuke to wonder, God, kid, you need to amp up the muscles. You gotta beat that guy. It really proposes the challenge to what Yusuke is going to do to defeat him. Toguro is definitely a textbook definition on what a layered villain looks like, and set the bar for what the next villains are going to be looking like in the whole course of the way Yu Yu Hakusho was going to progress with their story. But with Toguro being a menacing villain, you really did feel the threat without having to know much about him at that point. It's one of the greatest things about making a villain, is that you don't have to just dump all of your information in one go. You can just let the villain be a villain for a little while before we get into other details about him. As much as some villains feel a little rushed, Toguro was a villain that lasted a good chunk of time, and it was sprinkled in throughout the whole story as to why he's so menacing, why he is a prominent figure in the demon world, why he wants to challenge Yusuke. A lot of the whole basis of his story is the fact that he officially found his challenge with Yusuke Urameshi. And then we have Sensui, who is known as one of the most dangerous anime villains and has made so many top 10 lists, and this is why. Sensui has a disregard for humanity, and not in the way like the other villains that also had a disregard for humanity because, well, they were demons. Of course they're going to have a disregard for humanity. They want to kill humans, but this specific villain has a motive behind why he wants all humankind to be wiped out. The man is so psychologically out of it because of the things that he saw that made him believe that humanity is not worth saving. And he manipulates other humans to work for him and basically use them as pawns just to get enough time bought to distract Yusuke and kind of keep them away from Sensui long enough to open up a hole to the demon world to let the demons in. That is some kind of shit that you'd hear about in a crime documentary. There were times I watched this saga and thought, I am watching something out of Criminal Minds. I don't know what show I'm watching anymore. That's the tone change that I was talking about in the previous point. This is a character that truly has no penitence for his actions. because of what he saw, and he justifies all the things he saw. Unfortunately, there are some bad guys out there that have been warped by reality, and that becomes their motive. I want to make a reference real quick to an episode I did earlier in the show from the movie In the Line of Fire, where that bad guy was a former CIA agent, and because of the way he was warped by the CIA, it made him want to go against his country. Now look at Sensui, the things that he saw and the things that he's witnessed. He's like, hey, I saw things I can't unsee. You can't tell me that the world deserves to go on when clearly it doesn't. So the best way for me to save the world is just by getting rid of it, because we're no better than the demons. Unfortunately, there are some bad eggs out there, and that does prove Sensui's point, but nonetheless, Sensui's gotta be stopped at all costs because of the good people that do exist. The whole arc really does have a good versus evil tone that really pushes the envelope to feel like a societal echo to the way that we see things, the good people in the world that suffer and the bad people that just run amok so much that makes you wonder if there's kindness in the world. I could go on a whole lot more about Sensui and the whole thing, but I'm getting off topic. I gotta bring it on home with the last villain, which is Yomi, who's he's there. I feel kind of mean to say that, but Yomi's not really a villain per se. He's kind of an antagonist, but he still takes up a good chunk near the end of the series. In the Three Kings saga, there does have to be a big gravitas battle about who's going to take over Demon World, and well, Yusuke comes up to the plate and he's going to challenge Yomi to a fight, so that begins the final fight of Yu Yu Hakusho. But the way Yomi is introduced, it's just layered enough. He doesn't really want to go after humans, which is kind of a first, because he just wants to take over the demon world. He's like, nah, I'm gonna stay here. I just want my world contained. I just want this, no matter what it takes. And it's an interesting final fight to see Yusuke fight the final foe, and it's great, and it kind of brings everything on home, but Yomi's just kind of there. It's the first time that you end with a villain that doesn't really have evil intentions. It's just going to be an interesting fight. But he's still nonetheless an interesting character. In a way, nothing was going to top Sensui or Toguro, and well, everything kind of topped Suzaku, but every single villain, it kind of felt like a roller coaster. Suzaku was kind of like that first little crank up the hill, and then you finally get Toguro with that big giant over the head, like, oh my god, we're so high, holy shit, what's gonna happen? Sensui was like the dramatic fall, where you had to hang on to your underwear for what's gonna happen next, and then you just kind of got brought on home in the loop-de turns with Yomi. That's kind of the best way to say it. All the villains are like one roller coaster, and you enjoy every single part of the ride. But, well, of all the villains I've ever seen in anime, I've just never seen a set like Yu Yu Hakusho before. Not like I'm trying to compare all the villains to Yu Yu Hakusho like I'm some kind of connoisseur of villains, but really, when you watch villains, you want to have enough villains that are interesting enough but don't feel like you've been overtaxed by the villains. There's a perfect amount of time with every one of them. Suzaku, there wasn't enough time, but just enough time. Toguro, you got a lot and plenty of it, and that was very good. Sensui had a great amount of darkness to be able to parallel reality and have some good comparisons and echoes to some of the people we've seen that kind of feels like a commentary. And then you got Yomi, who's just, there, good times all around. The villains had plenty enough time to make a relationship with them and to be able to get to know them. Except, there is one character in the show that has always been present, but we never got to spend enough time with them, or even any time with them. And that's Yusuke's mother. In the opening for Yu Yu Hakusho, you see Yusuke's mother. You have her in some kind of scenario where the opening kind of gave you some samples and previews of the Saint Beast saga, the Dark Tournament saga, and you see Yusuke's mother is there. Except her ass was not present during any of that stuff. No, she wasn't. It's so strange. She was built up as a grieving mother in the beginning of the series, and then you saw a little bit of her in some of the other arcs, and then she was gone. The last time you saw her is at the beginning of the Dark Tournament arc. And it's so bizarre because she's still present in the opening every time as if she's a main character. It is one of the most mind-boggling things I've ever seen, and I've tried to make heads or tails out of it. And I have a theory. I wonder if Yusuke's mother was only present in the opening because of her presence in the book. In the book, Yusuke's mom is there for everything. She is there for the Dark Tournament arc, the Sensui arc, and even in the latter aftermath of Yu Yu Hakusho. It's kind of strange because not many parents are that good in the anime. They're either dead or terrible. So it's a little bit weird that Yusuke's mother wouldn't be there, but I kind of wonder if the creator Yoshiro Togoshi wanted her in the opening because of the way that the anime was produced, that there was an executive decision made, like, hey, we just can't put her in there. And honestly, looking at the series, the character Genkai had more of a motherly impact on Yusuke than, I hate to say this, his own mother did. Kind of like as a second mother or adoptive mother. And with the focus being on Genkai, that really built up Yusuke's relationship with Genkai to have that mother-son bond. So in a way, Yusuke's mom was kind of like the Chuck Cunningham of anime. And I hope people get that reference, and if not, do your homework for that one. You won't be disappointed. You'll know what I'm talking about. But Yusuke's mother wasn't the only alteration when it came to the anime adaptation. The entire anime adaptation doesn't exactly match the book. Now, it's not the first time, and it's certainly not the last time that we're going to be seeing an adaptation of a book turned into a TV show or a movie that's not really going to be a perfect parallel. But in this case for Yu Yu Hakusho, the pacing is a little bit strange. The way that Yu Yu Hakusho began, with Yusuke dying and beginning his trial, is much longer in the book than it was in the anime. In the book, it's 2 whole volumes that you have to wait for Yusuke to come back to life. In the anime, it's only about 5 episodes, 5.5 tops. So, some of the episodes you do see in the anime is, well, probably about 1 or 2 parts in the book at the beginning. It's kind of strange in a way that they just picked the best hits and decided that was going to be adapted. But the ending was kind of a switcheroo. The ending of Yu Yu Hakusho in the anime went on a lot longer, and in the book it was a lot shorter. So it's kind of a strange way of pacing that it did the exact same thing, just in different locations of the story. But that kind of has a reason behind the pacing. Near the end of the manga for Yu Yu Hakusho, the creator of Yu Yu Hakusho was not in the best health, but was determined to get the book out. But with his decline in his health, that also made a decline in the quality for the book, so a lot of it didn't have the same quality that we saw with the other 2 arcs of Yu Yu Hakusho, but I gotta give credit where credit's due. He was not in the best health, and he still wanted to get the series out there, even if it meant the quality would not be the same. The story still showed. We still got to see how everything was going to end for Yusuke and Kuwabara and Kurama and Hiei, and well, you take something over nothing any day. But when I was thinking about the manga, and when I first started reading it when I was younger, and I was a pissant, I complained. I'm like, I don't want all this story. I want to get to the goods. I want to see Yusuke come back to life. What's all this other stuff going on here? It wasn't until I became an author that I understood that the creator is going to present the story the way they envisioned it. And if the way Yu Yu Hakusho is envisioned with all of these different adventures that Yusuke was going through as a ghost, then, well, that's the way that Yoshiro Togoshi wanted it. Who am I to judge with the fact that he got his story out there the way that it's supposed to be? And maybe he had to take the reins and pull back a little bit, knowing that the anime adaptation had to be a little bit shorter than the way that it went with the book. But he's like, well, I got the book out there. As long as this central part of the story exists, then I'm okay if something's altered or changed. As long as the original story still has the original vision, then that's all that really matters. I think about that with my series Inglorious Inc., that whenever it does eventually make its way to a TV screen in the future, that there might be some stuff that gets cut out, but as long as the stuff that I wrote still exists in the book, then that's all that matters to me. It still did an amazing job, and it still made a hell of a story that lasted all these years. Which, let's see here, like what, 31 years now? Wow, 31 years, that's amazing. To this day, Yu Yu Hakusho still influences so many anime creators. I can give you two off the top of my head. Masashi Kishimoto, the creator of Naruto, and whoever the hell it was that created Attack on Titan, because my brain just does not remember that creator's name to save my life. Both of them have gone on record to say that two of their characters, that they have had a character inspired by Hiei from Yu Yu Hakusho. They've even flat out admitted it, and it's wonderful to see that Yu Yu Hakusho, being this kind of lost gem of the 90s that bounced around on Cartoon Network, still managed to inspire the future creators of current anime series like Naruto and Attack on Titan. Like, that has such a strong echo to keep going, knowing it was this one thing in 1992, and it's still managed to inspire people, and it's absolutely amazing. So, as much as I would love to go on and on and on and on about Yu Yu Hakusho, unfortunately, I feel like I'd be going off topic, and I want to save some of this material for future episodes. I feel like that'd be the best thing for me, and the best thing for this episode to feel a little bit digestible. But before I finish this episode, I have to say one final story. And it's about my mom. I mentioned my mom a lot in this episode, but my mom got into anime when I was about 11, 12 years old. She just wanted to get more involved with my life, and the best way was to watch anime. It's like that saying, you can't beat him, join him. And so she wanted to understand some of the anime series I was watching and some of the stuff that she kind of caught wind about. We started off with Naruto, and she absolutely loved it, and then we started to fish around further animes. She gave Bleach a try. She got all the characters wrong, and it's absolutely amazing with what she came up with. We would scroll through Netflix to find different animes to watch. We even watched Rosario to Vampire at some point, and yes, to my audience that has heard of that anime, yes, she watched it, and she made fun of it every step of the way, and it was great. Not many people can say they watched a sexualized anime with their parent and say they laughed during it. And then one day, my mom had said to me, hey, why don't we watch Yu Yu Hakusho? And I was 17 at that point. And I was like, say no more. So I hunted down those bootleg discs and put them in, and they were scratched to death because I was not the best caretaker when I was 11 years old. I had very poor habits of putting my discs back up, and we started from the beginning. And watching the series with my mom really helped me understand the series more. Not because of some stuff I was confused about, because I did mention I was a little young when I saw some of this stuff, but when I watched Yu Yu Hakusho, I watched it for my main characters. I was a terrible fan back then, but it's like my favorite saying, you chose how you wanted to be entertained. And I just watched what I loved about the show. But when I watched it with my mom, I really got to feel like I'm watching it for the very first time. And most of that is because of the way that my mother reacted to the show, with the way she laughed at some of the characters. And I got to laugh at something that I might not have found funny before, but I got to have that because of my mom's perspective and her commentary. There were some things I flat out skipped because, again, I was terrible and I watched some certain scenes, so I got to find scenes that I may have ignored in the past, and I got to really take that in for the first time and get all of the show digested. And that became our ritual, that I would come home from school and do my homework, and we would watch a couple episodes of Yu Yu Hakusho. She still quotes the series to this day. I still get text messages from my mom, and I know that she's quoting Yu Yu Hakusho with what she sends. And it's like our little in-joke, because she knows the series because of me, and I understand the reference. It's like one of those things where you get to be able to, like, say a random line that's not iconic, but you know what it means, and that was what we did with Yu Yu Hakusho. She even had a ringtone on her phone for my contact that played the opening theme from the series. We still have a lot of plans in the future that one day we would love to be able to have matching Yu Yu Hakusho tattoos because she loves the character Genkai. Oh my goodness. And we even made a huge project out of it when I took up the helm to cosplay the character Botan. And she went out of her way to go find an ore for me to have for the character. We found the perfect costume, got the wig styled and everything, and it was wonderful that I got to be able to cosplay from the series, and my mom got to be a part of that. And even though she's always been involved with what I do for my cosplays, this was something a little bit more personal, because she's like, hey, I really love this series, and I know why you love the series now, and it just became 10 times more special for that certain cosplay to come to life. So, I don't know if the title serves it justice for this to be called an underrated anime when it's clearly a masterpiece anime. Not many animes do get that title, but Yu Yu Hakusho was a series that was changing the game while everything was set in motion for anime to be distributed in America. It wasn't something like Sailor Moon or Dragon Ball Z, but it still felt as important enough to rub the shoulders with those animes. It was like a palate cleanser to have something different that wasn't superhero themed, something that wasn't too horrifying. It kind of felt like an anime that was a multi-genre, that you got to have different things in the series by having thrills, horror, action, mythology, drama, romance. You got a little bit of everything in there. I always say, you choose how you want to be entertained. And Yu Yu Hakusho was able to give a certain something to someone out there. It may not have been the anime that was immensely successful back then because it was a hard show to market, but the fact that it still reached the people it had to reach. I have talked to a lot of people in my lifetime that when I mention this anime series, they light up. And we both have a moment that we were once a child that watched that series, that we had something in common. It was like a pinpoint marker of our childhood linked together. And it was wonderful to still have that moment with other people that have heard of this series. And it has a special place in the hearts of all those kids that got to see that series. And they got to take it with them all of their lives. I am so grateful and thankful that I somehow persuaded my mother to watch this series, because it changed my life that I got to watch the series with my mother. I got to cosplay from the series. And now here I am with my podcast show, and I get to talk about the series that changed my life. And I'm so glad that I finally get to do that. Because it's my birthday month, it officially dawned on me that because I watched it when I was 7 years old, and I'm turning 28 on the 26th, I'm like, wow, I've had 20 years with this series. It has been there for a majority of my life. And now I get to take it for 21 years. And many more after that. I wish there was more that I could say about the anime, but I'm going to save that for some other episodes, because there's a lot that I can talk about with Yu Yu Hakusho, and I'm definitely going to take advantage of all of my knowledge and spread that in for some other anime specials. But until that episode comes up, it is time to find out what the next episode is going to be on the screen, Queen. So if you're new to the show, welcome. You've entered one hell of an episode that's going for an hour marker long. I have a system where I have a random selection in a bowl, and we all find out what the new episode's going to be together. And because it's the birthday series, it's entirely filled with my favorite movies and TV shows. So here we go. We're about to find out what the next episode is going to be. Here we go. Okay, that's mixed up enough. Alrighty. Okay, I got one. Ah, sweet. Oh my god. I haven't seen this in a while. This is going to be fun. Alrighty. So the next episode on the screen, Queen, is the Birdcage. Oh my lord, I bet a lot of people are screaming at home right now and I can't hear it, but I can feel it. I just know it in my gut. That's gonna be a fun episode and probably a lot shorter too. Oh, I can't wait to get into that one. It's been a while. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the series. Thank you to all of the ones that have still been with the series for quite some time. I love each and every single one of you. If you want to catch up with me in between uploads, you can find me on my Instagram handle at the Queen of the Screen. If you just want to say hi, you want to shoot me a movie recommendation, you can hit me up on there. If you want to see some funny stuff that I cook up, you can catch me on my TikTok at The Mystical Space Witch. And if you would like to see any of the books that I have written, I do have a link to my my Amazon author page in the description box. Okay, you all take care now, stay amazing, and I will be back next Sunday with another episode. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye!